The crossing of strangers. The terminal was louder than usual, or maybe it only felt that way to Mira Calden as she shifted her son Rowan against her chest. The boy gave a soft, tired whimper, his cheek pressed against the faded fabric of her thrift store sling. Mira whispered soothingly, though her own nerves trembled like thin glass. She had made it through worse days, worse nights, but traveling alone with a baby for the first time made her stomach twist. She clutched the single ticket she'd bought after months of scraping pennies from double shifts at a bakery and cleaning office floors on weekends. The ticket wasn't just transportation. It was a chance to start her new job interview in Port Kelson, the coastal town that felt like hope wrapped in fog and possibility. She needed this break, for herself and for Rowan, whose tiny fingers curled around her blouse as though he understood everything. Around her, people rolled suitcases without looking up, brushing past her like she was part of the scenery. Mira was used to being invisible. She didn't mind it most days, but today she wished someone, anyone, would offer even a small smile. Travel felt different for mothers carrying everything they owned in one bag. Meanwhile, several gates away, Nathan Corville stood stiffly beside a sleek black stroller that looked far too expensive for the exhaustion on his face. Baby Sarah wailed with a raw, breathless intensity that turned heads. Nathan bounced her gently, his movements awkward, hesitant, as if unsure how much pressure comfort required. Wealth had never taught him how to hold something fragile without feeling like he might break it. He had once been known for calm confidence during board meetings, for sharp negotiation skills, for the unshakable certainty that power protected him. But nothing protected him from the grief that clung to him now, a quiet shadow tucked beneath his tailored coat. Ever since Sarah's mother passed, he had lived in a strange half-life, one where success felt hollow and silence felt punishing. Sarah's cries rose again, piercing and desperate. Nathan murmured apologies to strangers who glared at him or pretended not to. He felt helpless, and he hated that feeling most of all. When boarding was called, fate guided them onto the same plane, Mira settling into an economy seat near the wing, Nathan a few rows ahead in a premium section divided only by a thin curtain and a world of assumptions. Rowan slept against her as the cabin filled, his breath warm and steady. Mira exhaled in relief. But the calm shattered minutes after takeoff. Through the small gap in the curtain, she heard a familiar sound, a baby's cry, high and panicked, echoing sharply through the narrow space. "Sarah!" The cries didn't ease. They grew more frantic, tugging at her instincts the way a storm pulls at the sea. Passengers groaned. Someone muttered loudly. A flight attendant hurried toward the noise. Mira's fingers tightened on Rowan's blanket. She didn't know the man holding the crying child, but she knew the sound of a baby who needed help. And without planning to, she found herself unbuckling her seatbelt. If you want, I will continue with part 2 now. Mira hesitated at the edge of the curtain, Rowan still dozing against her chest. The flight attendant, Jenna Millar, spotted her and raised a questioning brow. Jenna had the kind of soft presence that made nervous passengers breathe easier. Gentle voice, steady hands, eyes that paid attention. Mira liked her immediately, even in passing. "Is everything all right back there?" she whispered, trying not to speak over the distressed cries in front of her. Mira glanced at the red-faced baby in the man's arms. The child's tiny fists trembled in the air, her entire body rigid with exhaustion. She wasn't just fussy, she was overwhelmed, overstimulated, and headed for a full meltdown that could last the entire flight. I can try to help," Mira said quietly. Jenna studied her, then looked at the peaceful baby strapped against Mira's chest. Understanding flickered across her expression. "Let me clear it with the father," she murmured. Nathan wasn't thinking clearly enough to register anything except the spiraling panic in his chest.
Sarah's cries had reached a pitch he'd never heard before, a shrill desperation that made him feel like the floor had tilted beneath him. When Jenna approached, touching his arm lightly, he nearly startled. "Sir, there's a mother just a row behind the curtain who might be able to help, if you'd be comfortable," she said softly. Nathan blinked. Help? From a stranger? There was a time when he would have refused on instinct. Pride, privacy, the armor of someone who had learned to keep his vulnerabilities hidden. But right now, none of that mattered. He would have accepted help from anyone with steady hands and a heartbeat. "Yes," he said, voice raw. "Yes, please." Jenna stepped aside, and Mira came forward before she could change her mind. Nathan expected someone polished, confident, someone who looked like she belonged in first class. But Mira looked as tired as he felt. Her hair was loosely pinned, her coat frayed at the sleeves, her eyes warm but worn. And somehow, that made her presence even more grounding. "Hi," she said softly, as though they were meeting at a park instead of in the middle of mid-air chaos. "I'm Mira. This is Rowan." Nathan could only nod. "I'm Nathan. This is Sarah." Mira reached out slowly, her movements calm, giving him time to pull back if he changed his mind. "May I?" she asked. There was no hesitation in his answer. "Yes." She eased Sarah into her arms, careful not to jostle her too much. Rowan stirred but didn't wake, his cheek pressed to Mira's collarbone. Mira positioned both infants instinctively, shifting her weight to sway in a soft rhythm. The cries didn't stop immediately, but they changed. The shrill sharpness softened to trembling whimpers. Mira hummed. The sound was low, melodic, steady. An old lullaby, perhaps, one that carried the shape of comfort even if the words no longer existed. Passengers around them paused, glancing over curiously. The irritation in the air thinned, replaced with cautious relief. Nathan watched in quiet awe. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. Sarah's muscles loosened, her breaths steadied. Within minutes, she tucked her face against Mira's shoulder, clutching the edge of her shirt as though she had known her forever. "How did you—" his voice cracked. Mira gave a small, almost shy smile. "She just needed someone who's calm. Babies feel everything. She's been overwhelmed for a while." Nathan swallowed hard. The words hit deeper than she intended. He'd been overwhelmed, too. Lost, grieving, pretending. And his daughter had felt it. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "I'm just a mom," Mira replied, brushing a thumb across Sarah's tiny back, "and sometimes moms help other babies too." Jenna, hovering nearby, mouthed a silent thank you before stepping away to handle other passengers. The cabin had shifted from tension to tranquility, as though the small act of compassion had rewired its atmosphere. For the first time since boarding, Nathan exhaled fully. "If you'd like," Mira said gently, "I can hold her a while, until she's asleep." His throat tightened. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Mira looked down at the two sleeping babies in her arms, their breaths rising and falling in quiet harmony. "You don't need to repay me," she whispered. "Sometimes we're just put in the same place at the same time." Nathan wasn't sure he believed in fate, but looking at Mira, calm, kind, exhausted yet strong, he wondered if this meeting was something close to it.
Unexpected truths at 30,000 feet. For a few long minutes, the only sound was the quiet thrum of the engines and the soft, steady breaths of the two babies resting against Mira. Sarah's lashes fluttered as she settled deeper into sleep, and Rowan curled closer, as if welcoming the tiny companion resting beside him. Nathan sat down slowly, almost as if he feared breaking the spell. Mira followed, easing herself into the empty seat beside him that Jenna had discreetly offered. The curtain remained drawn, giving them a small pocket of privacy in the dim cabin lights. She trusts you, Nathan murmured, his voice low with disbelief. Babies know who feels safe, Mira replied, brushing a gentle hand over Sarah's back. And today, maybe she needed another pair of hands. Nathan looked down at his palms, as though unsure what they had done wrong. I try, he said quietly, almost to himself, but she cries so much, sometimes hours, sometimes all night. Mira's eyes softened. She's grieving too. Nathan froze. She's a baby. Babies grieve, not with words, with fear, with restlessness, with clinging. They feel the absence before they understand it. Nathan's breath caught. He hadn't expected the truth to be so direct or so gentle at the same time. Mira didn't push. She let the silence sit between them until he was ready to fill it. Her mother died, he said in a whisper, the words sharp as glass, though he'd said them before. There were complications. She didn't make it. Mira nodded once. No pity in her expression, only understanding. I'm so sorry. But she didn't say it with the rehearsed sympathy that others gave him. Hers felt real, rooted in empathy rather than obligation. It's been just me and Sarah, he continued, voice unsteady, and I keep thinking I should be better at this, that money should buy competence or stability or something. Mira gave a soft, weary laugh. Money doesn't make you a parent. It just gives you better diapers. Nathan blinked, then surprised himself by laughing too, quietly but genuinely. It felt like exhaling a breath he didn't know he'd been holding for months. Roan shifted in his sleep, nudging Sarah's sleeve. Their tiny hands brushed, and Sarah curled her fingers instinctively around Roan's. The sight made something in Nathan's chest warm unexpectedly. Your son seems very peaceful, he said. Mira looked down at him with a mix of exhaustion and fierce love. He is, most of the time. But he's had rough nights, too. We're figuring life out together. Are you traveling for family? Mira shook her head. Traveling for survival, I guess. Then, realizing she'd said too much, she added softly, I have a job interview in Port Kelson. Something steady. Something that might give Roan a better start. Are you nervous? Terrified. But I've been terrified before. You learn to keep walking anyway. Before Nathan could respond, the plane suddenly jolted. A pocket of turbulence rattled the overhead bins and caused several passengers to gasp. Mira instinctively tightened her arms around both babies, shielding them with her body. Sarah stirred, but didn't wake. Roan whimpered once, then settled. Nathan saw the way Mira positioned herself, how she leaned forward slightly, sheltering the infants without hesitation. Something inside him shifted. Admiration, respect, gratitude, maybe even a quiet kind of awe. The turbulence passed after a few uneasy seconds, but the cabin's nerves remained tense. A few rows away, someone muttered impatiently, complaining about the noise and the babies. Jenna swooped in quickly, giving the passenger a sharp look that said their comments were unwelcome. Then she paused beside Mira, checking on them with a gentle smile. Are you all right? She whispered. We're okay, Mira said. Jenna nodded and moved on, her presence steadying the atmosphere around them. Nathan exhaled slowly. You're incredible, he said again, but this time it wasn't just admiration. It was gratitude mixed with something deeper, something he didn't dare name. Mira didn't look at him. She only stroked Sarah's back and said softly, I'm just doing what someone once did for me. Nathan wanted to ask more, but the baby slept on and Mira's tired eyes softened in the dim cabin light. For the first time in a long time, they both felt less alone. By the time the captain announced the descent, the babies were still asleep, nestled together against Mira's chest as though they had known each other far longer than an hour. The cabin lights brightened in soft increments, waking passengers in a wash of warm gold. Mira blinked slowly, exhaustion sinking into her bones now that the crisis had passed. Nathan kept stealing glances at her, not out of curiosity, but from an unfamiliar ache that pressed against his ribs. How often had she done this alone? How many nights had she soothed her own child with no one to lean on? He wanted to ask, but he sensed that some truths in her life weren't shaped for casual conversation. The wheels thudded onto the runway, a small jolt that rippled through the aircraft. Roan stirred first, stretching his tiny fingers against Mira's collarbone. Sarah followed, blinking up at her with sleepy confusion. When Nathan leaned forward, Sarah recognized his voice and reached out, her little hand unfurling toward him. Mira transferred her gently. "She's calmer now," she whispered. "Because of you," he replied with a sincerity so raw that Mira looked away, not used to receiving gratitude that wasn't laced with judgment or pity. As passengers shuffled to collect their belongings, Mira instinctively slipped back toward her seat to gather her diaper bag. She didn't want to linger in the premium section. She never liked feeling like she was somewhere she wasn't meant to be. Nathan watched her retreat, as though something important were slipping through his fingers. He stood as soon as the aisle cleared enough, adjusting Sarah in his arms before following her. Mira had her head down, rummaging for Roan's pacifier. She nearly jumped when a quiet voice spoke behind her. "Mira, wait." She turned slowly. Nathan stood there, expression uncertain, as if he feared she'd disappear into the crowd. "I didn't get to thank you properly." "You did," Mira replied. "Really, I'm glad I could help." "But you did more than help. You saved this flight from turning into a nightmare. And you saved me from feeling like I'm failing." Mira swallowed hard. She was used to being overlooked, not appreciated. Praise felt foreign on her skin. "You're not failing," she said gently. "You're just grieving, and so is she. You're both doing your best." He looked down at Sarah, whose fingers clung to the fabric of his shirt. "It never feels like enough." "It never does," Mira replied. "But that's parenting." A pause lingered, soft, warm, uncertain. "Do you have someone picking you up?" Nathan asked. Mira shook her head. "I'm taking the bus. It's cheaper." He hesitated. "Can I give you a ride? I promise I'm not trying to make things uncomfortable. I'd feel better knowing you got where you need to go safely." Mira's instinct was to refuse immediately. She didn't accept help. She couldn't afford to owe anyone anything. But then Roan fussed again, and the weight of her overstuffed bag dug into her shoulder, and her legs trembled from holding two babies for most of the flight. Exhaustion made her honesty slip. "I don't know," she murmured. "Mira," Nathan said softly, "it's only an offer. No expectations, no strings." She searched his face for anything hidden, pity, obligation, arrogance, but she found none, only gratitude and something gentler. "Let's see how crowded the bus line is," she said quietly. Nathan nodded, accepting that small step as if it meant something significant, because to him, it did. They walked off the plane together, their babies bundled close, two strangers connected by a moment neither of them expected. And even though the airport was loud and rushed and full of urgent movement, something about the four of them, two parents, two children, felt strangely steady, like something had begun without neither of them noticing. The baggage claim was a blur of rolling belts and echoing announcements. Mira kept shifting Roan from one hip to the other, though her arms trembled with fatigue. Nathan noticed instantly, stepping closer, not intrusively, just near enough that she didn't feel alone in the rushing crowd. They waited in silence for her worn canvas suitcase, the one she had bought secondhand and reinforced with duct tape. When it finally appeared on the carousel, Mira reached for it, but Nathan moved first. "I've got it," he said gently. She opened her mouth to protest, but her strength had limits, and today she was well past them. "Thank you," she whispered instead. Outside, the cold evening air swept around them like a restless tide. The bus stop across the road was already crowded. Families, students, tourists, all bundled in coats. The line extended farther